Most people associate Japan's rise with the electronics and cars, but how important was coal really in making modern Japan possible? Well, to talk about this, today I'm joined by Stephen Davies, who's an historian, an author, and one of the leading experts on the maritime history of East Asia and Hong Kong. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, Christian. Yeah.
Hello. So, today we talk about the semiconductors and AI, like how they shape the global powers. And in the late 1800s, the situation was completely different. It was coal, of course, was something that we don't often think about anymore. But that was really the equivalent strategic resource of what AI it is today. Could we make that argument?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can see in the course of the 19th century, but really only in the last half of the 19th century, people get what is glibly called the Industrial Revolution largely wrong. They think it sort of started in the 18th century and was well underway by the mid 19th. Really, what counts for most of the world as the Industrial Revolution, the arrival in the world of industrial processes for producing goods and moving them around the world, it's really the late 19th century. One of the best indexes of this actually is to simply look at either a graph showing the percentage of global GDP represented by sea trade, that's so how much of global GDP is export trade, which is virtually unmeasurable until about 1850, 1860. I mean, the graph just trundles along at the bottom and had done since Neanderthal times, and then it starts to lift up and it goes exponential. So now it's a 20, 30% of global GDP. Another way is looking at the rise of the number of ships trundling around the world, which again depended on the steamship because sailing ships were slow. And steamships weren't really big until after 1880, which is why it's important for Japan, with the invention of the triple expansion steam reciprocating engine, which for the first time was an efficient user of coal. Uh, how it works, triple expansion,
Yeah.
a simple engine of the sort that was invented in the 17th century and developed in the 18th has got a single cylinder which goes up and down, woof, 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 woof. That only uses steam once. So the pressure in the steam pushes the piston down, and by the time, but very quickly they worked out a way of having steam push the piston back up again, so it's working both ways. But then that steam is exhausted, turned back into water, put back through the boiler, and in it goes again. So that steam has been used just once. So in the 1880s, this chap called Alfred Holt in Liverpool, who had a shipping line, brilliant engineer, devises a triple expansion. So the steam goes into the small piston, pushes it down, moves into the next size piston, pushes it down, moves into the big fat piston, pushes it down. And what that comes down to is changing the use of coal to much more efficient quantities so that per horsepower in, let's say, 1830, 1840, you're burning between, now, golly, I'm going to have to switch out of imperial measure here. You're burning between 2.5 and 4 kilograms of coal for every horsepower that you develop.
Yeah.
The triple expansion engine gets that down to about 1.25 pounds, so that's half a kilogram
Wow. Okay.
per horsepower per hour. At the same time, steel ships have come in to business. So you've got more powerful, more efficient engines in bigger ships. And that's why the 1880s are such a trigger moment. And Japan comes in, thanks to Commodore Matthew Perry,
Yes.
just as that is beginning to take off. So you've got the period before the Meiji Restoration,
Yes.
when Japan is kind of finding its way to dealing with all these gaijin who come in to make a nuisance of themselves. I mean, I love the story. I mean, what's amazing, I hadn't realized, but Yokohama had a British garrison from the 1860s
Mm.
through until the early 1870s. I mean, it was a full battalion, 1,000 men who used to march around with a band, uh, and eventually they all departed after something like 15 or 16 years of British garrisons in Yokohama.
There was a lot of brawling, especially in Yokohama. They would have like British sailors going drunk around, getting into with samurais. What was the relic of samurais by then, and they would get in these fights, and some of them, got killed even. There's
Yeah, yeah.
still
I
the
mean,
cemetery right in Yokohama, right? You can go
no,
see it.
there is a famous one which caused the what's called the Satsuma War,
Yeah.
which where a British guy just basically got stroppy and promptly got chopped to bits
Yeah. Yeah.
in the street. So yeah, there was this period of adjustment. The nice bit about it is that one of the bandmaster of one of the British regiments, the Lincolnshire Regiment, in the early 1870s, which was in Yokohama,
Hmm.
he composed the Kimi no Go,
Oh,
the
really?
Japanese national anthem. Yeah,
Really? Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
He was the first guy. He
Wow.
was he was taken off from his regiment
Uh-huh.
and employed by the new Japanese Naval Academy as their bandmaster because they realized that, modern navies have bands.
Sure.
And then they thought, yeah, but these nation things that all these gaijin are talking about, they have anthems. So best we have an anthem. So we need a tune. And Bandmaster Fenton is turned to and he produces the tune based on a very old
Which is
Japanese
not
air.
very joyful as as an Italian. I always compare with the Italian anthem, which the Japanese love it because it's so cheerful and joyful, right? But the
Yeah,
Japanese anthem is a bit another
yeah,
thing.
yeah. It's a bit of a dirge.
Yeah,
But it's just really rather nice that that's how it all began. It's a
yeah,
perfect example of how cultures actually succeed in coming together if you leave them alone
interesting.
and don't make a big issue out of it. But anyway, so Japan is arriving just at this moment. It's deciding to join the world at the moment when the world is about to begin a quite enormous maritime change.
Yeah.
And I mean, coal had been being used in Japan like it had been in China and elsewhere for centuries, but not industrialized. And so another bit of Japanese Western cooperation, a chap whose name has momentarily escaped me,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, uh, who had worked for Jardine Matheson,
Yeah, I
arrives in
know. I know what
Japan.
you're talking about. He's got
Yeah,
a today. You can still visit his house in Nagasaki. Um,
right.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
I will
Yeah.
find it out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So he arrives and he's the guy
Yeah.
who decides he wants to get into making a bigger thing out of coal. He's actually not very successful, as far as I can
Oh,
remember.
really? Okay.
That in the end he does enough, but really getting the coal going requires it passing into Japanese ownership, and it's the beginning of one of the great Zaibatsu, I think, Mitsubishi, which starts to move into the Takashima mines and really start producing coal. And that then becomes a fuel for export, but also for fueling the rise of Japanese industry and Japanese shipbuilding, which takes time.
So it did start in Nagasaki then.
Yeah, the
Uh,
coal did. Yeah.
which it's weird because today, if you think about the main coal mines, you think about Hakodate. I mean, to my recent knowledge, I wouldn't think of Nagasaki so much. But yeah, I guess it makes sense for the Mitsubishi to start there because they had the coal plants right there next to the bay.
Well, and of course, then there's that amazing little island somewhere down there, which was simply an entrance to a coal seam and just got built up completely. So that whole area, but it's seismic. So from the point of view of exploiting coal, it's a difficult area to exploit. But it was very good coal. So this is the other thing, that coal is not just coal. It comes in a bit like human beings in all kinds of colors and qualities. And Japan has quality steam coal. It's called bituminous coal. The French is Louis, Houille. and bituminous coal is the stuff you want for steam engines. It it has high calorific value.
Okay.
So when you burn it, you get lots of heat from a relatively small quantity. It's why, although wood can generate steam,
Right.
you have to have huge amounts of wood to get the same steam, and you're not likely to get steam at the same pressure. Because the other thing about the development of these steam engines is they're going alongside the development in engineering.
Well, it's funny because so you mentioned Matthew Perry, the Commodore that arrived at the famous for opening Japan to the global market, and he arrived with a couple of steam engine, if
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
right, and there must have been like this such an impression to the Japanese, which had never seen anything like that, and I remember going through some of the diaries where you have this Japanese going on board of the ships and calling them like this ship goes on fire. Like it was actually their impression was that the ship was actually running on fire because they would see this smoke coming out. They couldn't imagine what was underneath. Do you...
Well, I don't know enough about Japanese culture, but in China,
Mm,
the fundamental cosmology
mhm.
is called wuxi, which
Okay,
is the five elements theory,
sure.
and very much like uh, the theories that were banging around in the 16th, 17th century in Europe, which opposed had these five opposed colors,
Yeah,
elements: earth, fire, air, water, and so forth.
sure.
And water and fire are opposed.
Right,
Use water to put out fire,
right.
use fire to boil water, but there's no concept of steam except as something wet.
Yes,
And if it's wet, it's great for cooking rice,
right,
but it can't do anything else. And the concept of steam as just a gas,
right.
which is what you see coming
Yes,
in the 18th and 19th centuries in Europe, so that if it's a gas, it can do what gases do, any gas. So you've got this hot, dry gas called superheated steam, and that can get to work. And you find Lin Sishu, the great commissioner in Guangzhou, who grabbed all the opium and threw it in a pit and mixed it with seawater and let it out to the joy of the fish in the Pearl River Delta. Uh, he just looks at this and he goes, I don't know what it is. It's fire. These Guaylo, they're using fire in some way to make their ships go. I've got no idea how it works. Uh,
somehow they're doing it. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
and this is a general problem. But people are basically the same, and smart people look at it and eventually go, yeah, yeah, I can see how it works, and simply adapt and take that on board. And yeah, we can make a steam engine. But then you've got to import all the engineering, and that's
yeah,
why in this early period,
yeah,
Japan is doing a lot of what these days we call joint venture
yeah,
activity,
yeah.
where there are people coming in helping build lighthouses, build ships, dig coal mines. And as soon as the local guys go, yeah, yeah, I got it, off you go. Thanks very much. We're good to go.
How much of the the great trade related to opium these ships they would arrive also to Japan were the same ships also using both as in the case of the great goodsman the missionary they would go with the Bibles on one side and then they had the opium on the other side through the Chinese coast would these ships also have both. They would have the coal coming from Japan on one side, and they had the opium, or maybe they would also sell opium in Japan. Because this part of history, to me, it's quite mysterious.
I think the answer is that by the time we're talking about, so we're into the 1860s, 1870s,
Hmm.
opium was much less. I mean, this does not come out in most of the histories. It's much less of a major traffic. The Brits were still making good money out of it,
Yeah.
but if you actually look at the data, by let's say 1870,
Hmm.
about 60–70% of the opium that's being consumed in China is being grown in China.
Oh, okay.
So again, smart guys, this is how you make money. Why bring all the stuff from India and we can grow perfectly good poppies here? I actually knew someone in Hong Kong whose grandfather was a poppy grower in Canton Province in the early 20th century. Um,
Wow. Okay. So they were
yeah,
growing still in the 20th century. Wow. That's
yeah, it's because opium is not actually outlawed. by international agreement till 1904.
Mm,
So it's a constant little trickle.
interesting.
Whether opium was ever used, I simply do not know whether opium was used in Japan. And by and large, there were separate uh, trading routes. I mean, I don't actually think that um, the ships who were taking opium up the Chinese coast would then carry more opium over to Japan. I've never actually read of
Yeah.
anybody taking opium to Japan
Right.
or of there being any market for opium in Japan.
Another thing that you mentioned is fascinating. I'll get to that. But by this time, I guess the loading and unloading of the coal was done in a different manner. Because one of the fascinating things that you recount,
Absolutely not. No. Coal in East Asia was loaded and unloaded by human labor all the way through until really the Second World War.
in the
Um,
same way, in the same fashion.
In the same way, I mean, the famous Nagasaki ladies,
Yeah,
those
exactly.
fantastic photographs of
Yeah.
people. There's a brilliant description by a an American missionary. He's a missionary bishop, and he's on a trip around Southeast Asia
Hmm.
and East Asia, and he arrives in Nagasaki, and he describes these girls coming alongside, and they put these kind of ladders up the side of the ship,
Yeah.
and they're throwing from down in the barge, they're throwing a basket of coal, which may weigh 5 to 10 kilograms, throwing it, picking it down here, throwing it above their head, where it's picked by the next girl
Wow.
and up. And there's about 6 or 7 of the girls, and they do this
Incredible.
at the rate of, I think it's something like phenomenal rates. Every now and then a girl falls off, falls into the harbour. Everybody shrieks with laughter. She climbs out, gets back to work. It's the most extraordinary sense. And at the end of it, the girls are full of beans and they climb back down the ladders, take the ladders down, wave goodbye, laughing and cheer. I mean, it's
Incredible.
quite
Do you
astonishing the
have
amount
any
of.
do you have any knowledge of why specifically girls in Nagasaki were doing this? I mean, were the men like busy in doing something else? I'm just
No,
just
it was mixed teams. I
was
mean,
mixed.
there were
Right.
girls. Often it was there were all girl teams.
Okay.
Sometimes it was men and women.
Okay.
In Hong Kong too, I mean, basically it has to do with poverty.
Right. Right.
People need the money,
So probably the
and
whole
these
family
people.
would get down on the port. The ship is coming, so whoever first comes would probably first served. Like in the movie industry back then, like they would gather like extras outside the movie theaters, and they would just get the first one.
I think it was more ruthless than that. The family would go down there and they'd queue up to be picked by a gang boss,
Okay.
and
Okay.
the gang boss would be working for the guy who owned the lighter,
Right.
and the gang boss would pick the workers.
Okay.
And so, if you were actually having a bad day, you had a cold or
Yeah.
you broken a finger or something, you are condemned to poverty. You're not going to get
Yeah.
picked.
No, for sure.
Um, but yeah, the thing is, these people were the amongst the worst paid
Yeah.
people in the given society at the time. You look at in Hong Kong, there's a guy called Butters who does a survey of Hong Kong labor in the 1930s. And the coal coolies are just mentioned in one line as people who earn, I think, 50 cents an hour,
For sure.
which was
Yeah.
very little money
Yeah.
given the cost of living in Hong Kong at the time. I mean, but again, it takes us back to realizing that life expectancy in Britain, for example, for an average male in Britain in 1890 was under 50 years old, under 50 years. And if you went right down to the bottom 10 or 15% of society, it was only 37.
Yeah. Wow.
In Asia, I mean, I suppose life expectancy in urban Japan, the people who were the coal coolies, I very few of them would get above 50, I would guess.
Right.
Um, and it's worth remembering just on how much human misery the industrialization of the world depended.
Right. And you also gave some statistics because you found out that the fastest unloaders and offloaders were the Singaporeans, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
They, 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 they were patchy. I mean, they could be extremely fast. Same with the workers in Port Said. They could be extremely fast. The worst were the Australians. They were incredibly slow and always on strike, and nobody wanted to coal in Australia if they could avoid it. Um, but yes, someone like Singapore had a very good reputation for being able to coal
I-
a
I'm
ship.
curious. I'm curious where Japan falls in the scale, but maybe Yeah.
It was good.
It was
Uh,
good. Okay.
Consistently good. There's a marvelous series of American uh, US Navy produced booklets. First one comes out in 1888 and it stops being published in the early 1920s.
Yeah.
And it's called Coaling Facilities and Harbors of the World. And it just goes all around the world,
Yeah.
listing all the coaling ports.
Incredible.
And there's a column which says, how many tons per hour? Uh, and Japan is always up there in, say, top 10, 15% in terms of tons per hour.
If you look back, like in the 1800s, coal was internally produced in their own in Akodate again, like in Nagasaki, as you mentioned. But today, like 99 point, I think it was 5%, 7% of the coal is imported.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
even though it still contributes to like something like 20, 25% of their energy consumption. So that's fascinating because Japan basically had all this was producing its own energy for the first time, of course, in history. But then, even though it lost this ability around the 50s and 60s, when it started, importing a lot of the gas or oil, and also and the import of this energy when incredible, like now is what 98% the total energy is imported in Japan, but was still able to become a power in terms of industrialization during the 70s and 80s. So I guess you could say that coal really helped Japan during the Meiji era, where all these great reforms were taking place.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, ultimately, it comes to, if you think about it, it's going to be a complex cost problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah,
Back in the Meiji era, getting cost and time, getting coal to Japan in order to do everything that Japan wanted to do would have taken
right,
a lot of money and a lot of time.
right.
And that's one of the reasons why by 1890, Japan is the source of 80% of the coal that's coming into Hong Kong.
Wow.
If you look in 1860, that coal, that 80% is coming from South Wales in Britain, coming out all the way around the Cape of Good Hope and coming to Hong Kong. So there's a cost in time, a cost in transport, and a risk of loss. Because, I mean, right up until 1900, there's roughly a ship a week disappearing without trace
Wow.
somewhere in the world. So there are all kinds of risks and costs involved in producing the coal. So home production made sense. Get to the post Second World War period, get Japan building its economic base, building its economy, suddenly paying for miners to go down into difficult mines to excavate coal is going to cost you more than importing it from Indonesia or
Right,
Australia or South Africa.
right,
End of story.
right. Since we're there, and time is running out actually, but could you mention like your latest book? Because he has this as a one of the key features, coal, but also Hong Kong. And could you tell us something about it? And where could we get it? Because I'm also curious to read it.
Well, it's probably not going to be published until early next year.
Okay.
Publishers work slowly. It has to go through peer review processes and so forth. And we're still waiting on one of the reviewers to get around to reading the book, reading the manuscript and giving me comments. It's called Powered by Coal, the energy that built Hong Kong. And basically, it's making the point that over the 180 something years since the British arrived and wrested Hong Kong by force from China, Hong Kong has imported 500 million tons of coal. And if you took an average 1890s steamer and filled it up with coal, it would mean a steamer arriving in Hong Kong every single day without a break
Wow.
since the moment the Brits arrived in Hong Kong. It's that much coal.
Mm.
And you can see as Hong Kong builds itself from a little British outpost, trading outpost, into an economy that has got a level of self-sustaining quality, uh, you can see it's coal that's doing this. They introduced rope works, glass works, ice works, cotton spinning, dockyards, whatever they're making, It's a steam engine back of it that's providing the power that makes the sugar or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
this is a story. And what's interesting is why I wrote the book
Mhm.
is that there is not a single history of Hong Kong that mentions this. Not one.
Yeah, I'm sure not in Japan either. So that's very interesting. That was very interesting conversation. Thank you so much for your time, Stephen. Hope maybe we'll
My
have
pleasure.
another chat maybe when your book is out, hopefully.
Right. Okay. Thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you.